Welcome to Laugh, Cry, or Die. This is a podcast that you're listening to with your ears. My name is Steve Wilbury. I'm your host, and I am a multiple surgery-itis, chronic pain having sack of human crapness. And joining me as my co-host, Naomi Strain, who is, I don't know, what
Hello,
are you? What's your
I'm a
deal?
seizurist. I have seizures all the time.
All the time.
All
So
the
last
time.
couple episodes, we've talked about aspects of a life lived in the garbage heap, would you say, Nay? I don't know. How would you
Yeah,
describe the
life
life
as
that
a lesser human,
life life
as
is
a rubbish person.
as a rubbish person, not a person made of rubbish, a person who's just not good at it. Because that would
Yes.
be weird if you were actually made of like discarded pickle jars and whatnot.
Well, normally after a seizure, I'm not far off. I'm like, on Labyrinth, that garbage lady in the tip.
Yes,
That's me. I can't remember
I'm
it.
more.
No.
What do you remember the garbage monster at the back of Fraggle Rock?
Oh, I love Ragnarok. Yes, totally.
So we're like
Actually,
that with
that
less
looks the way that your
beaks.
camera is angled right now.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Anyway,
Anyway, so the last few episodes, we've been talking about kind of what life is like on the other side of normality, really, I think is the more actual
mm,
conversation way to put it.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
but today I thought we would take a deep dive into our co-host, Naomi. It's the Ballad of Naomi Strain, a
Ooh,
seizurist.
are you gonna
And
make me sing?
yeah,
No, no, we won't do that.
no, it's a tale as old as time, an English woman in New Zealand spazzing out all over the place.
Welcome to an English person in your country.
Yeah, you're welcome, Immigration New Zealand.
Anytime.
And so then, well, this week we're going to talk about Naomi's kind of journey to the other side of normal, and then next week we'll do me, and then the week after that we'll do the thing that's on the plan that I've made that totally exists and that we follow every time.
Absolutely. That means that every night before, I have to message you saying, Steve, what the heck are we talking about?
No, no, Naomi, no. You look at the schedule, and then that's the same thing. That's what happens, or else the producer will be mad at us. Don't kill us, producer.
Well, see, this week, with it being all about me, then I
Hmm.
can just chill.
Just chill. Yeah. So I'm going to ask Naomi some interview style softball questions, like she was a guest on some kind of American political show. Was where I was going to go,
Wonderful. Dig
or
deep.
dig deep. We're gonna dig deep
Dig
into
deep.
Naomi's crusty underbelly, right into her,
Dirty old brain.
right into her navel like belly button lint is where we want to get to.
Please, please do.
But there's just something about the texture of belly button lint that is revolting to me.
I've never, ever had that.
Something is
Yeah.
blooming, so I'm just trying to sniff off mic.
Everyone's got bad hay fever this year.
Oh man, it's been brutal. Although we are in the southern hemisphere, but most of humanity is in the northern hemisphere where it's winter, which is non-hay fever season, which I am jealous of.
Yeah, but we do get the bonus of a bit warm.
Yes, and also not being destroyed by the coming nuclear apocalypse, which I presume is
Oh, there
on.
is that.
There is
Always an
that.
upside. We've got hay
Okay,
fever, they've got bombs.
cool. I'll take it.
Right.
Right. Anyway, Naomi, what's your fucking deal? What's your deal, bro? What's your
I
fucking deal? That's my interview
I
question. No, well, I'll ask you an actual first interview question.
okay.
Um, right. You live in New Zealand. Where are you from, Naomi? Where did
I'm
you?
I'm from a wonderful place called Coventry, right in the middle of England, which is like a big city anywhere. But
Right.
we have a cathedral and we have Lady Godiva. So
Well, there you
yeah,
go.
just a bog standard English person doing English things.
Well, so what made you move to New Zealand?
Oh, it was my ex-boyfriend actually. He always wanted to come back to New Zealand. It visited on a trip, and it became this magical place where everything's wonderful. So when my job there was fine, I was going to have to move cities, but he was annoyed with his job, so we thought, "Oh, sod it, we'll just do it." And so we did. Um, and yeah, it was quite a pace of life change. and
Mm.
I miss a lot of stuff. I won't slag New Zealand off,
So, what did you
but
guys come straight to Nelson?
yep, straight to Nelson and stayed here since. And that
Wow,
was like 16 years ago. And Nelson is, I'm trying to be
diplomatic.
diplomatic. Yeah, yeah. If I was to do it again, I wouldn't. But, but but I would go to Wellington instead, where there are more people being alive and doing things. Nelson's pretty
Hmm.
sleepy and quiet.
Very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Nelson is so for anyone who's listening who doesn't live in New Zealand, which is I believe most of everyone else, Nelson is a tiny town, population of about 30,000 in the region, is that right?
Possibly.
Anyway,
Yeah,
it's
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 small.
small. It's small. And it's full of old people who are waiting to die and
Yes.
people who've just been married who are making babies who now wish they could die because they can't sleep.
Yeah, it's a nice place to grow up and a nice place to die. It's the bit in the middle that's
Yeah.
like I've heard it referred to as a graveyard of traffic lights.
I've heard newlyweds and nearly deads.
Oh, I like it.
The other one. I like that one.
Yeah,
But it is a beautiful region. The scenery here is
it
spectacular.
is. It
There
is.
is, you know, three national parks on our doorstep. It is a beautiful region, but if you want to like do stuff,
Yeah.
not
I
a
mean,
lot.
there's like shows and stuff, but there's like not gigs or, vibrant town stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like on a Saturday evening at 8 o'clock, the streets, except for the one street that's full of bars, is empty.
yeah, yeah.
Just literally dead. Anyway, we're just slagging off New Zealand instead of slagging off you, Naomi.
Yes, like
I
me.
still I still wouldn't live in another country though. I've lived in a number over the years, and this is my favorite by a long,
There's
long way.
definite upsides, and particularly with my seizures, um, being in a small city, it means that medical people can take a bit more time with me, and
Mm,
like in a big city, they'd have to just basically give me drugs and run away. Whereas
right.
here, they can try not to, and it's a bit safer for
Yeah.
that. There's less people to stab me, and when I'm vulnerable and unconscious, so that's a bonus.
That is like I did leave the keys to my car on the seat of my car for several hours, and I came back and my car was still there. And I was like, well, thank God for Nelson.
Nice, yeah, that's pretty good.
I've left my phone just like out and come back and been like, oh, there's my phone still there. Like just to not crime does exist here, don't get me wrong, but it's very much not a factor,
It's
I
not
think,
to the extent of other places, I don't
of
think.
a city, right? So you lived in Coventry and you moved to New Zealand and then you broke up with your boyfriend because
No, no. Well, we normal relationship stuff, but it got to the point where he wasn't particularly helping me during seizures.
oh right, so did you start seizing it when you were still together?
Yes.
So I think so. You moved to New Zealand with your man, and then let's
Yep.
talk about and you were working like in a normie job.
Yeah, yeah, working in a very good normie job, at a government place. Which you won't go into details of where I work because it makes me sound boring. Um, So yeah, worked there, good job, making lots of lovely cash and having a very lovely life with not having to worry about bills and having lots of fun.
And,
Um,
and that comfortable middle class existence you were promised as a youth,
yeah, that one where you don't even worry about the bills because they just get paid automatically out the bank account and that kind of stuff. Just
with
very comfortable.
disposable income.
Yep,
You're like
yep,
a
everything.
moon person.
I know, I was like a proper normal grown up.
Jesus,
Yeah, yeah.
who the
So
fuck are
yeah,
you?
very normal life. Normal coupley things like arguing, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, like
Yeah, pretty boring.
the pretending you're happy, that kind of stuff. Um,
Yes.
so when was your first seizure?
The very first one was in 2007. I was had a day off from work, uh, feeling fine. Was going to see a mate in the middle of the day, so drove into town and I felt a bit thirsty. That was all. And next thing I know, I'm in my car, and there's all people leaning in the window, and I was very confused. I thought I'd stalled the car and didn't know why everyone was making such a fuss. Had a bit of a headache, and then realised that the tree in front of me was closer than trees normally are, and turned out that I'd driven through a crash barrier um, alongside the river and drove straight up a rockery into a tree. Uh, yeah, I had no real injuries apart from my airbag didn't go off and I headbutted the steering wheel and had a Toyota symbol on my forehead for a couple of weeks, which
Which
I
is
don't know if that's
objectively
it.
hilarious.
I know, right? So I don't know if that was a good advert for them or a bad advert. It's like, hey, Toyota. Also, their airbags don't go off, you know. But yeah, I was pretty lucky. The car was right off. Um,
Sorry, I just need to process for a minute your
mhm,
head with an actual like
mhm.
T imprint on it.
Yes, yes.
Were you like, God, I wish I had bangs? Did you like just wear a hat?
No, well, luckily because I was a bit screwed up from the seizure, I didn't have to go out in public too much until it had gone. And I
Right.
used to look like I looked like how my life was. I looked like a middle-aged housewife. I was very boring. I
Right.
did have more hair rather than my current coolish hair. I looked very boring, and yeah, so it
Anyway,
didn't.
okay, sorry, sorry. I'll let you move on. All right. So you got the Taylor imprint on your head, which I'm gonna keep that in the back of my pocket to embarrass you with forever.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
you're welcome. And you so people were leading it, and then did you get like taken to hospital or
Yeah, got taken to hospital in a neck brace. They called Russ to tell him, like the police called him to say, hey, your missus has written the car off. Can you get to the hospital?
bloody
And
women drivers, eh?
I know, right?
Whoa.
And he
That's what
thought
they
at
say in
first it
New Zealand,
was
though.
he thought it was kind of like a bit of a joke, like a mate trying to wind him up or something. He was just like, okay. And then he said to the police on the phone, he said, "Oh, she's all right though, eh?" And the copper said, "Just get down here." So he was like, "Oh, okay." So he got to the hospital, was sat in the waiting room. The police went out and said, "Oh, they're just getting her ready, and then you can go through." And he then thought, "Am I going to identify her body?" Because they hadn't, the way they were referring to me
Right.
was like, yeah, that things weren't okay. Um, he At this point, I was absolutely sobbing like a baby because after a seizure, you can get pretty emotional. And with this being my first one, I'd had no experience of it. I remember crying like an idiot and thinking that he was going to go mad at me for hurting the car. So when he came through and saw that I was alive, it kind of softened the blow about the car, I think. So, it was
Swings
like,
and roundabouts.
I know, right? So yeah, it was all very confusing at that point, and they put it down to a possible blackout because when you have a first seizure, if it's not been witnessed as such, they saw the
Right.
aftermath, but not the actual seizure. They count it as a blackout until you start having more, and then they start looking into it, and it's like, this could be a bit more serious than a one-off.
Right, because you get your driver's license taken away for being a seizurist, so you get like a free one, basically.
Yeah, well, no, you can't after that first one. You can't drive for I can't remember how long it was. I think it was a month at that point. So they just take it off you and go, "Oh, you're all right. You were probably just a bit tired that day," and you get it
Right.
back after a month. And then if you have more, then you get banned or stop it
Yeah.
for a year, and so you have to be a year seizure free before you can get your license back.
Wow. Because I
Yeah,
dated a woman in the UK, and it was
show off.
I think she was yeah it was a shorter time frame, and she was always counting down the time until her she could get a driver's license, and then she'd have a seizure. And she'd go, "Oh, God damn it!" And then
Mm,
we'd have to
mm.
start her thing again.
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay, so you've had your first seizure, and then how long were you in hospital that first time?
I was out that day
Right.
because once they go like, okay, you're not injured from that, your brain's working like normal, probably just a one-off, all your body's working as it should, you're breathing
Yeah.
and you're not bleeding, so yeah, off you go. So that was fine. Um, and there was I felt all right. Like I had some days off work because I had a car crash,
Yeah.
so that was nice. It was just all, it was quite confusing. It was like, what the heck just happened? Because
Right.
I hadn't had, any kind of blackout. I'd never fainted or anything like that in the past. So it was, yeah, like, what the heck just happened? And it
So
made it
what?
into the
What?
newspaper, which was
Ooh.
fun. Yeah.
Although to be fair, Ed Nelson, I have literally seen a newspaper article about a chicken who laid a giant egg, and it was the time that chicken laid that egg. Like
Wow.
it, I wish to
Yeah.
God I'd saved it because
I
it.
remember
I
when we
was like,
first when we first got here, one of the news articles, it was, on the actual news was a butcher's in Nelson was closing down. And we were like, is this what New Zealand's like? Is that
yeah.
as bad as it gets?
You remember when Shrek the sheep died?
Yes. Yeah.
Wall to wall coverage.
Well, I mean, luckily things have got worse as the years goes on, and now there's more interesting news, like ram raids and gangs. So, whew.
Thank God for ram raids. God, who would have thought that would be a thing?
I know, right? That's yeah, quite unexpected. But
So
yeah,
anyway, so
yeah,
you've had one seizure, you're out, you're a bit confused. This is a bit, but you're like, hey, shit happens. So when was
yeah.
your second seizure?
It was about 6 months later. On my lunch break at work, I got into a shop, and I remember kneeling down, and that was it. Uh, and I went in to find out what happened after I'd got out of hospital from this one, and they said that because I get no memory of kind of the just before and then for some time afterwards. And they said that I went into the shop and I was mumbling, and then I kind of staggered amongst the aisles a bit, and then stood in front at the cash register. Didn't have any, I wasn't trying to buy anything, just stood there, stared at them, and then went fully stiff and fell backwards and whacked my head off a like a shelving unit behind me, and knocked all that down and split my head open. So that one was a bit more, damaging.
Hmm.
And from that one, I got taken into hospital and was in for a few more hours. Didn't need stitches on the back of my head, because heads bleed a lot anyway,
Hmm.
but was pretty concussed for about a week after that. And I'd bitten my tongue really badly, so that was all swollen up and very sore. And that left me in bed for over a week, that one. So yeah, that was a bit more impactful. And it was at that point they said, okay, this might be a bit more than just a one-off spaz. Um, and they generally assume when you start having multiple seizures that it's epilepsy. Without doing too much more, they go, okay, this is what we're dealing with. So that's when they started with a bit of medication. Uh, but then I'll go straight on to the third seizure, which again was a lunch break from town, your lunch break in town. And I remember sitting on a bench. Turns out that wasn't the bench that the seizure happened. I'd wandered off and sat somewhere else. But sat on a bench and was seen to fall face first off the bench and headbutt the floor and have a seizure. Um, and I again woke up in hospital with my boss standing there. Yeah, okay, this is what's happening. Another concussion, and that one I did need stitches. I'd headbutted the floor really hard, and broken my glasses and bled a lot from my head. Yeah, and had stitches. Got a good black eye from that. Uh, yeah, so that was the third one, and then they just started happening more and more regular. Having them at work and having them at home. And like I said, my partner wasn't particularly, I don't know if it was understand. I don't want to slag him off, but I don't know if it was just perhaps a little bit of not knowing what to do, a bit sort of
Hmm.
like a fear of, oh shit, I'll just ignore that this is happening. Um, like I had one at home underneath, where I kind of shivered in my seizures, underneath, just partially underneath a coffee table that had like a decorative edge. And as I was spazzing, I kept kind of headbutting that. Um, and he didn't move me, didn't move the table. He sat
Right.
and opened his mail because he was quite excited to get a new book in the post. Um, and so, yeah, he didn't quite deal with things as one might hope for.
Indeed.
Yeah, so started having them more and more, and that's when they started doing more brain tests and scans and things like that. So yeah, that's when it became
So
a
you
bigger
went from
thing.
one seizure, and I just think that so going from normal life, and then you've got like that in between period where
Hmm.
you've had a seizure and they're starting to come up, but were you still in that mindset that I can still live my life and have a job and happen to have seizures at the same time?
Well, yeah, because I didn't kind of think it was going to keep on happening. So after the first one, it was like, oh, weird. After the second one, it was okay. That was a bit more dramatic. But on the third one, that's when it was shit. It's happened again. Like I don't know what's going on now. And it still, I was still working. It wasn't really affecting things, but it was stressful not knowing when it was going to happen again, when or if it was going to happen again. Where was I going to be? Was I going to walk into the middle of a road, or obviously I wasn't driving by this point, but even like going on a push bike, it was like, am I going to be safe doing that? And it starts to make you question kind of being out in the world a bit, like, am I safe in the world?
Mm.
So that was it started to get more stressful. And when it stepped up from that and it was a lot more regular.
Well, define a lot more regular. Like it went from once every 6 months, and then how
Well,
many more?
within the
And then three
space,
months, and then
yeah, it was within the space of a couple of years. I was having probably, once every month or two.
right.
So that was then okay. Epilepsy, seizures, um, we'll carry along with that. Uh, and then it became sort of more weekly. Uh, let me just do some quick dating calculations. Um, Probably about 2013 was more
So
regular.
before Trump.
Yes, yeah, so I couldn't blame on him. Yeah.
Curses.
Um, and
And
then
is
yeah.
that when you started to think, okay, this? Because I think the thing that's interesting for me is that transition from that normal life, that life that we picture other people having, and then
Mhm.
I don't know, in my head, it's like a descent into,
Oh, completely like a spiral almost. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because at that point I was still working at the same government place. I sound like a spy. I won't tell you where it is. But I was working for this same
I was
place, and
waterboarding freedom fighters all
yeah,
day, every day.
I wasn't doing torture, promise. No.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
But no, actually, it was getting more and more. Just looking at the dates, it was more like 2012. Anyway, yeah, so I was still working full time. But because of having them more and more, it was starting to impact work. I was less able to be there, like more sick days. I was having more at work, so it was more disruptive. And we had like a reshuffle at work where we were all going to have to reapply for our own jobs and like cutbacks and stuff. And chatting with my boss was kind of told in a roundabout way, don't bother reapplying because you won't get it.
Wow.
Yeah, because obviously other people could be there more regularly. So, yeah, so my job at that point, losing my job, that was like, right, okay, this has now impacted one of the, and I'm not saying work is the most important thing in people's lives, but it has now affected one of the most impactful.
Mm.
Um, and it just so happened that through various circumstances, that was the same month that me and my partner split, which also meant then that we were going to sell the house. So technically, job, house, partner in kind of the space of a week. So
That's
yeah,
spicy. That's
that
pretty
made me
spicy.
need a drink. So not loads of drinks, but just like, whew,
And
this has happened.
yeah, no, that's a sit down and have a moment for a
Yes.
brandy.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's that slow descent. It was like, okay, things are starting to be like having issues with things. And
Mm.
so when it happened, it wasn't like a massive breakdown. It was like, right, okay, this is the next sort of phase. So after losing my job anyway, I did then sort of join a temp agency to try and get bits and pieces. And I did. I worked at the airport for a bit, um, not as a spy pilot, but
Lame.
in the at the airport doing stuff. And I worked at the university, the college, for a while, bits and pieces like that. But then even that became okay. This isn't happening because I couldn't guarantee that I would be there, even if it was a job that was one day a week. I couldn't
Right.
guarantee that that one day would be a good day. So now it's got to the point where I can't work because nobody can count on me at all. Um, though it does seem to be that when I'm extremely active and extremely engaged, my brain doesn't kind of quit and short circuit as much. So
So when you've got more going on, you do less seizing?
yeah, kind of. It's like and this one thing we'll go into actually is the two types of seizures I have. Uh, the ones that are epileptic are mostly controlled by drugs, and the other seizures which are not epileptic, they seem to hit when my brain slows down. I sit at home, I just chill, and then they hit me. So
Right.
I don't know if that's because my brain's relaxed or if it's because my body's relaxed. There's a couple of sort of current theories that I'm researching into that. And we'll go into again later on these ones. Um, but there's basically a nerve that runs down the side that could have been impacted um, from the injury that I had years and years ago. So I'm currently researching into that. So it could be a positional thing of where my neck is trapping blood
Huh.
flow and nerves. Mm,
And then that triggers the non-epileptic seizures.
yes, yeah.
Okay. Right. That's we'll talk about seizure types in a minute. I just want to finish your descent into slow
Hmm.
madness.
Yes, yeah.
So your job's gone, your partner's gone, your house is gone. You're like, I think because a big thing for me was when I stopped working for other people and like having a job, and that coming to the realization that my health could not support a job
Hmm. Hmm.
reliably.
Yeah.
When did that kind of kick in?
Uh, Probably 6 months after losing my full-time job.
And you were
Yeah,
like, okay, this is not working.
yeah. So that I was, doing hobbies and things, but
Mm,
life was extremely different to how it had been. And I think part of it was like a denial, like this will all go away in a bit, an
yeah.
unspecified amount of time, things will get back to normal. And so each time you have a seizure or each time, you think again, like how different life is, it's like a bit of a depression from that, frustration. And I did, to be fair, start drinking more.
Mm.
Like, weekends were generally spent drunk.
Well, that's that
You know,
self-medicating thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not saying to the point of it being an issue, I wasn't at that stage at any point, but it was definitely an escape of,
Yeah.
right, let's have fun, let's ignore that there's a big issue going on, and let's just drink and party a lot. Which in itself, whilst I was all drunk and skipping around, was fun. Alcohol isn't particularly good at preventing seizures. So, it's kind of a vicious circle to get into with that.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, so that went on for I don't know, probably a year or two of not really facing things. And then that then began to impact other stuff, such as I was having more seizures, and certain people around me, friends and things, were starting to get quite judgmental of my inability to deal with a normal night out or normal life or having to cancel plans. Yeah, I started to lose a bit of um, support from my
So
social
the
circle.
social circle starts to shrink as your
Yes.
unreliability grows.
Yeah, and their judgment of it because of the
Mm.
two different types of seizures. Um, I have been accused of faking, which is one of the most painful things
Oof,
to have to deal with. Yeah, like trying to
that's
convince people,
spicy.
yes, I'm poorly, for real. And it's that whole, like we've talked about before, it's that invisible disability.
Yeah.
Uh, because I paced normal on quite well, so to an
Yeah.
outside person, they go, "Oh, she's, just skipping around doing life," and they don't realize what's actually going on in my brain and in my day-to-day life. So yeah, getting those accusations of being fake, not only were they not helping, me with normal life, it also made me get quite sort of down on myself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that judgment is one of the hardest things.
So like what about how was wins with it as you kind of lost jobs and stuff when you had to pivot and be like, look, I cannot do this.
Well, they allowed me a benefit at first when I lost my job, because that's how things work, which is wonderful. But as then time went on, and my doctor was signing me off as unable to work uh, every 3 months was how it was working,
Yeah.
and have to go back, and he'd say no for another 3 months. And so they were sending me for all sorts of assessments and tests to make sure that my doctor wasn't a liar, and
Right.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And at one point, at one of the wins, of people who don't know, that's your benefits, social
Working
security.
income New Zealand. That's so like if you're broke and you have to go and be like, I cannot work. Can I have some eating money, please? And they go,
Please, sir, can I have some
maybe.
more?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, so at one point in there, open plan office, and the lady interviewed me. She said, "Okay, so what happens when you have a seizure?" I was like, "Well, okay, well, I fall to the ground, shake around a bit, and then wake up all confused." And she went, "No, I don't understand. So what happens before it?" And so obviously I can only go on anecdotal, because my experience of a seizure is I'm sitting watching TV and then I wake up in hospital or with paramedics around me or whatever. So I said, okay, well, I start to mumble and not talk, not make sense, and then I will fall and I have quite ladylike seizures, so I don't flail and go backwards, but every muscle in me goes tense, and I tend to sort of curl inwards, like my shaking intention is inwards as opposed to outwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like visually, not like my body, not quite fetal position, but I tend to go more shaken into my space.
Yeah.
And she went, "Oh, I don't understand." And I said, kind of arsey, kind of joking, like, "Do you want me to show you?" And she said, "Yes." So in an open plan office, I had to act falling off a chair, lying on the ground, demonstrating what my seizure looks like, sitting up confused and trying to talk. And it was extremely humiliating. Um, and so then I got back into my chair, and she went, "All right, okay, we'll see you in 3 months." Uh, and then the next time I went in, a different lady interviewed
Mm.
me, and her judgment was extremely hurtful. She said, "Oh, so how often do you have them?" And I said, "Once, twice a week." And she said, "Oh, so you just sit around watching TV, have a seizure, and then carry on, right?" And it's how like how judgmental. Like, she didn't understand that, um like, say the day before a seizure, people have said that I my attitude can start to change a bit, like I'm kind
Right.
of not reacting like I would. Then I have the seizure, and then I'm buggered for about 3 days. And so that's then 4 days of your week taken out. And if I have two in a week, that's my week scrapped.
Mm.
And like, the exhaustion after a seizure isn't like, bit tired, I could have a lie-in today.
Yeah,
It's like
it's like
full body.
different. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't think people really, and we can talk about this a bit when we talk about seizures a bit more, but like, yeah, just the amount of physicality that
Hmm.
goes into a seizure is mind-boggling.
Well,
Like
they
it's
kind of
tired. I
say
could, yeah,
they say that a 5 minute seizure is equivalent to running a marathon, because every single muscle has been completely tensing for that amount of time, like intensely. And my seizures can go on for a long time, like probably 20 minutes is a good one, like a nice seizure. The longest recorded is an hour and a half. So the tiredness from that
mm.
is, I probably run
And
about
that's
10
like I
marathons
think,
a week.
and that's to have like all of your muscles are activated for an hour and a
Yes.
half. So like every single one from the tips of your toes to the ones in between your fingers.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, you get aches where you didn't even realize aches could happen because you don't think about those muscles, like the front of your shin,
Yeah.
or like, say, in your fingers, it's like trying to grip things afterwards because everything's hurting. And so yeah, people don't see. So yeah, in the benefits office, having to demonstrate, to them and having to try and explain myself in order to be able to afford dinner, um, was that was when the societal view became quite clear that people didn't get it.
Yeah, that's a hard one when
Mm,
you're like, uh you know, like you've had your own judgment of yourself for
mhm.
not being able to do this thing that you really think you should be able to do, and then to have the people who are supposed to be trying to help you view you negatively when you're just like telling how things are
Yeah, yeah. For them to see your
is
life as a bit of a joke, a bit of a gimmick.
well, they're because I think they're always in wins, they're always like trained to try and ferret people out who are, oh, my phone has rang, hold on, I'll pause the recording. Or actually, I'll keep it in and just edit it out. Hello, wife. Hi. Nothing. I didn't call you. Oh, I'm recording a podcast with Naomi. Yes, right now. It's it's yes, the AA has come and they put on the spare tire and they've taken the other tire away and they're going to fix it and then call us when it's ready and then we can drive in and get the spare tire, the tire put back on. I think it's covered with the AA insurance thing. So yeah, he said he couldn't. I asked it, can they fix? He said if it's in the side wall, then they can't fix it, but he couldn't actually see a puncture, so it should be fine to repair. Okay. Okay, I will try and remember to do that. I ended up borrowing Ian's car and I drove him in. So, okay, go away. Now, Rachel says you suck and she hates you.
Oh, thanks, Rach.
Uh, Apparently she says that that's the opposite, but that's what she said.
I knew it.
Okay, stop talking. I'm recording a podcast. Go away. Okay, bye bye. Ugh,
Wives, huh?
wives. Can't live with them. Can't have heterosexual sex without them.
As the saying goes.
Right. Where were we? So you were seizing, getting judged from not just people, but from the very systems designed to help you. Um,
Yes. And alongside with benefits, people judging me, friends judging me, and me judging me, the medical community um, haven't always been awesome to me. It's got a bit better over the years because of the amount of fuss I kick up and the amount of sort of research I do into myself and the more, I don't know, kind of proof or validation or verification of what's going on for me.
yeah,
They've become more understanding, but there's still um, an element, and there's still some groups of people who don't quite get it because I don't fit into a tidy, neat little box of, here's our standard seizurist. This is what we do. I take a bit more work and a bit more understanding. So yeah, the judgment flies at you from all angles. Um, but
right. So let
yeah, yeah,
so you've fallen basically as far as you can go, I
hmm
think.
yeah.
And then now where you are compared to say 2016, maybe like the last, how do you feel that you kind of put yourself back together from that point where you're doubting yourself, the officials are doubting you, your friends are doubting you? Like, how did you put your any kind of a sense of self back together to keep going
Uh,
forward instead of just sitting and
I
waiting to die?
I had to force myself through boredom to be out in the world. So because by this point wasn't in a relationship and I'd lost a few friends, uh, there was a lot of time of not doing stuff, and I didn't want to miss out on life. And so I was forcing myself to go out in public and did what I call self-dating, which if there was an event or a film or whatever that I wanted to go to, I'll just go on my own and sod the consequences. It was kind of a bit of a rebellion against my own brain. Like, I'm going out in the
Right.
world, don't care if there's no one there to look after me, don't care. What's it, kind of not self-destructive, but not particularly looking after myself because looking after myself was boring. So I kind of lost a lot of and this is a good thing. I lost a lot of I don't know, shyness,
Right.
and gained a lot of confidence because I was doing things on my own. Like going into a restaurant, having a meal on your own can be quite challenging for people.
Yeah.
But I was like, I can actually do this, or going to the theatre on my own. And some people go, oh my God, I couldn't do that. And it's like, well, this is how I have to get into the world. And I wouldn't like, I'd say to people, this is where I'm going to be if you want to come along. But I wouldn't like make it a date with someone like, hey, let's all go and do this because I couldn't guarantee that I'd be able to do it. And so my only responsibility at that point was to me. And it was actually really liberating. So like now I have a hell of a lot more confidence because, sort of pushing through that sort of awkward, oh my God, I'm in public with no friends.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's how I got back into normal life by kind of living two lives at once. Like one is running along the track of seizure, seizure, seizure. It's just going on and on. And then the other side is, oh, I went to the theatre or I went to the cinema or I did these things. And so kind
So
of got
you,
my
so you
sense of identity back through doing things that I wanted to do. And that's actually how we met.
so yeah, that I was doing a comedy night in a yurt because that's a thing that happened. And yeah, and then you came along, and I remember you talking about the self-dating thing at the time, and then you just started
Mhm.
kind of coming and hanging out at comedy, and then we got to be friends. I was like, oh, you're a broken shell of a human too.
Yeah, so when we realised we were both rubbish, I think that's
Hmm.
when we became real friends. Because yeah, I'd come along to the yurt and kind of sit on my own a bit away from the stage, and then I remember. By the way, this comedy night at the yurt, I was pretty much the only audience for most
Sometimes
of the time.
there were a few ones that were vaguely busy. Most of the time, it was you and four others, roughly,
Yeah,
three
and
of
I mean
whom were
it, and yeah, and it was a night of where people like you comedians could try out new material
yeah,
and kind of
we called it the
feedback.
comedy grind. The whole point was to come and just get up on stage and just do it. And it didn't matter if it was to an empty room or whatever, just to like
Yeah,
grind out that like hours and hours of time that it takes to get good at stand up. Because
yes.
at the time, there was no stand up night at all in Nelson. And the guy who I ran it with, we had been doing improv comedy for years and we're like bored of improv, wanted to do stand up. We're like, sod it, we'll go into this smelly tent. And God, did it smell.
Was
Um,
smelly.
it was so smelly. You did get a bit nose deaf after a while, but like that first step in was always like, oh, it smells like yaks in here. Um,
So
but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and
So
then
I'd come along and be the only audience person, and I remember one day you guys said, "Come and sit over here."
yeah, come
I
sit
was
with
like,
the cool kids.
"Yeah, yeah," and that's when you said, "When are you getting up on stage?" And so
Mhm.
bit by bit, it's when I sod it. All right, I'll get up and do a thing, and it wasn't shit. I
Yeah,
did all
you're the only
right.
person I've ever seen who didn't bomb the first time they did stand up, and I'm still angry about it.
Yeah, I kind of did all right and did some competitions and things.
Yeah, so do you
Um,
think like being that creative side has given you that narrative of non-seizurist?
What you mean, given like an identity outside of the seizures?
Yeah, because I think it's very
Mm.
easy to, when you have things wrong with you, that becomes your identifying feature. Much like
Yeah,
people with jobs are like, I'm an engineer or I'm a this,
yes,
that's
very
who
much.
they are. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's those two sort of parallel lives. It's like, yes, I'm a seizurist, I'm a spaz, but on the flip side, I'm this stage presence without sounding too pretentious. I like doing stage stuff. I do, writing and started to get, into theatre and film. But yeah, it was like a parallel life to that. And while I was a seizurist, it wasn't my identity.
Mm.
And people, because people weren't sitting in my house watching me having seizures, other people's awareness of me was me being out in public having fun and being confident. So I became that person in the public world. And so kind of gained um, people who were more interested in my life as opposed to judging and being out of my life. So
So
it
you
was,
had so because you had the connection through the creative stuff and the theater,
mhm.
they were able to see, oh, this is her contributing, and then the seizures are the side dish, as it were.
Yes, yeah, yeah, not defining me. That wasn't the ruling thing. And I think as well with creative people, um, generally more accepting of quirks and
Yeah,
differences,
for
and
sure.
um, almost, I don't know if it's the right word, but almost celebrated for your difference, even if it's a negative difference.
Mm,
And it's like, oh, this person isn't a standard normie. There's a story, or there's a thing
yeah.
behind this person. It's and I think it gives you a bit more of a, I don't know, rounded or interesting outlook on things.
Mm,
Like one of my comedy sets is all about seizures. And at first, people are like, oh my God, are we allowed to joke about this? And it's
mm,
like, yes, I can joke about it. So feel free to laugh along. And like with the name that we refer to ourselves as the Spaz Club, not everybody is comfortable with that at first.
mm.
And even paramedics, when they come to me, some of them that know me quite well, they'll now, when I wake up and come back to normal, they'll say, it's okay, you just had a spaz. And some of them, like, okay, that's what we're calling it. Especially new ones, if they are with an experienced paramedic,
All right,
they're
they'll
like,
say
oh
they'll
my
be like,
God, is this how we refer to epilepsy patients?
I need to
um,
speak to HR.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I've said, remember when you go to your next patient, you can't call it having a spaz. That's not okay. But yeah, so sort of talking about it and doing the comedy about it kind of took the taboo away, kind of the sting in the tail of it
I
away.
think
It's
like
like,
because
I
much
was gonna
of
say, it's like
like
using the bastard, using that to empower me as opposed to letting it
mm,
control me, I guess.
I think a lot of stand-ups but use it as kind of therapy of like, this is the shit that
Yeah.
goes on in my life, and I'm gonna process it in front of 40 people by making everyone laugh.
Yeah, yeah, and as well, again, it comes back to that confidence thing because um, having seizures in public or even at home, I've pissed myself in front of people,
Mm,
which is awful, but it also means that when I get on stage, nothing compares to that embarrassment. So it doesn't
yeah.
matter what the fuck happens on stage because it can't be as bad as that. So it kind of, takes away that stress thing, takes away the butterflies because it's like, oh, I'm not pissing myself, so that's a bonus.
I think, yeah, like when like truly horrible things have happened to you, and
Mm.
I know through the course of your seizures you've had concussions. And I remember you had like you damaged your optic nerve one time because
Oh
you
yeah,
were,
I've still got partial blindness in one of my eyes, but I've still got
is that
some, and I've got the other eye. So hey,
is that from hitting your head basically?
hmm, yeah,
Have you been told to wear a helmet?
I have considered that, um, but yeah, because it's generally my head that does get the injuries because I've got a big block head perched on the top, and so when I fall,
I
it's
didn't want to.
generally the
You do
first
look
thing.
like a Funko Pop.
Yeah, absolutely, but yeah, lots of head injuries and concussions and things. So yeah, yeah.
And so then when like it's very true, that thing of when the worst things happen to you. all of a sudden those things that were normal worries become non-events, you know?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
when you were having your normie life before the seizures, and I know you didn't have to worry about the bills or whatever, but like I'm sure there were things that gave you concern or like, oh, what will I do about this? Or oh, Janet thinks this about me in the office or whatever. And all
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that vanishes and gets kind of eaten by this giant ogre of your illness.
Yeah, a bit like even like I don't know, just getting that confidence with talking to a stranger or walking through town thinking, oh, have I got a mark on my shirt or something like that?
Yeah.
Did I, and I get a bit of food on my
And
blouse,
I
that
think
sort of thing. It's like, yeah, it becomes less important.
part of the journey as like a rubbish person is like having your previous life eaten by the ogre of your illness, and then which is, in some ways a relief. You don't have to worry about these things, but then you have this giant ogre falling,
Yes, yeah,
and you have to then process the ogre to like get to a point where you're okay enough with what is wrong with you to start to find things that are right with you, and that
yeah, yeah,
finding those places where your positive qualities do resonate, because it's so
yeah.
easy to just
So
lose
it's
all
not
of
just a coping and presenting a normal life, but it's also trying to excel and succeed in new things,
it. Mm.
and learn new skills that you didn't know that you had. Uh,
Or that you didn't even know you had the capacity to do because you weren't challenged by your previous normie life,
yes,
and now you're in
yeah,
this new position where, okay, how do I make myself a person? We're lucky
yeah,
enough in New
yeah,
Zealand that we have a social safety net, and you're not going to starve or die. You're in a relatively safe place. But then that's not enough. And I think people, when we talk about things like universal basic income or stuff like that, like it's not enough to be a person who just has their basic needs met. It's not a pleasure. It's not an existence that's good to have. I don't think.
yes, yeah. It's that classic thing of working to live or living to work.
Yeah, very
And
much so.
for most people, it is a matter of trying to churn through work or an everyday just to be able to have somewhere to go to sleep or
So
something
I
for
think
dinner. And so having
I
that
want to, I
pressure
want to,
taken off is
yeah.
is pretty good. Having that space to
And
actually
what made wins? What got wins to come around? Like after you were demonstrating on the floors and stuff like that. Like how did you get them to finally be like, okay, fine, we get it?
it took for my doctor to finally agree after all the tests. He didn't want to sign me off as permanently disabled
Hmm.
at first because he felt that by doing that would write me off and kind of give me no hope for a normal future.
Right.
So over a long period of time, he kept trying, and I would go back in and say, it's still happening, nothing's changing. I'm trying all the tricks, and all the
Yeah.
drugs and everything, and it's not helping. And so one day, he and my neurologist said, yeah, this is it. She's screwed. She's fucked.
Right.
And he permanently signed me off as a disabled person.
Right. So finally, you got the piece of paper and went in and slammed it on wins. It was like,
Yeah,
look.
and even that was quite a weird one because I got in the post I got the letter from the neurologist basically said, and yeah, we agree that this isn't going to change. This is how she is, and that's it. And it was like, phew, I've got the bit of paper, which means I can keep getting some support, but also, oh shit, they all agree that I'm broken.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a double-edged thing, and that was yeah,
That
that
thing that
was
they didn't want to do for that reason finally came through.
yes, yeah. So that was quite a shock. I mean, I'd known it was fact, but getting it in black and white from professionals, that kind of stung a bit,
Yeah, like
but
the
needed to
actual.
be done
I'm sure there's more you could fill days with stories and anecdotes
for
and
sure.
stuff. But I think just for people who maybe don't know that much about epilepsy or whatever, like talk about the difference between, because you said, your epileptic seizures and then the other seizures. Like, what's the difference between an
Okay, so an epileptic seizure is you're misfiring in your brain. Um, so like an electric shock almost, it's just your brain short-circuited And on like EEGs, when they, touch the wires and have a look at your brain, they can see where things are misfiring, which is, how some people can have surgery. It's like that's an extreme, to take out that bit of the brain that's not working, or
So with
excuse me,
epilepsy tell through an
no, go
ECG
on.
that you've got um
Oh,
epilepsy.
with that, yeah, they, excuse me, they chuck wires on your head, and then the main one is they then basically try and provoke a seizure,
Right,
with lights and sounds, and maybe doing it when you're sleep deprived, because ideally, if you have a seizure, whilst being recorded, they can see what's going on.
right,
But with a lot of diagnosed epileptics, it doesn't necessarily ever show on anything. They can only judge it on
right.
anecdotal, such as how long a seizure lasts, what the person looks like, um, do they piss themselves, do they stop breathing, there's like kind of a checklist,
Right,
and
of things,
and
right.
more
So it's not
ticks.
so
Yeah,
it's not like they can slap the wires on and be like, okay, you've got weird brain waves, you're epileptic. They have to
yeah,
take evidence from things that have gone
yeah,
wrong.
yeah. And so it's mostly they can say yes, this person is definitely, or they're definitely not. It's quite sort of black and white to them. I get confusing for them because some are and some aren't. And like I say, the ones that are quite well controlled with medication. The ones that aren't, um, and like I say, do you want me to tell you the kind of behind that, or do you want to save that for another day?
Uh, let's go ahead. Let's finish you off on the differences because I think that is a big part of it is because you don't just have epilepsy, you also have these other weird ass
Yeah,
seizures.
yeah. I say the difference between the two seizures for me, like my experience of them, is they're absolutely the same. I and apparently present mostly the same to other people. So um, they both make me fall down. They both make me forget. They both injure me. I feel pretty much the same after them both, apart from when it's an epileptic one, I am more exhausted for a lot longer and more confused, about what went on. But from my experience of them, there's not really a discernible difference, which is part of the thing that confused medical people to start
Right.
with. Yeah, I tend to, with the epileptic ones, stop breathing more, uh, which is fun. Um, but yeah, that's mostly what they can sort of see the difference with, is my breathing.
Huh.
Hmm.
Interesting. Right. Well,
Yeah.
actually, my Zoom has just stopped working, so let's go ahead and call it there because I'm going to need to do something drastic to my computer shortly.
Okay.
But I think that was a good chat about you and your little journey through spazzy to professional spaz.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting actually to look over my life like that. It's
Hmm.
like you say, this is like therapy. It's great.
Well, it is just, well, I think that that is kind of part of this podcast is just us being able to go blah, 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 blah. And maybe
Yeah.
people listen to it. I hope they do.
Everyone listen to me talk about myself.
Well, that is podcasting in general, I think.
Pretty much.
And I
Yeah.
think as well, part of the thing that maybe would be nice is, people who are just starting on their journey to getting to grips with being a broken person and how you can have a pretty cool life with neat stuff. And the, I mean, gifts is a horrible word. It's like, it's not a gift, any of this, but it
No.
gives you the capability to be so much stronger and just badass than
Yeah, and reevaluate and try, or try through necessity, to have a different life.